Hello there, friends. Welcome to BJJ Meditations. This is BJJ Meditations episode number 73. I'm your host, Joe Hannon, Joe from Jersey. I was thinking before, as I was brushing my teeth to prepare for this podcast, so you don't have to smell my breath through your car stereo or whatever you're listening on. I was thinking about where the hello there, friends thing came from. And the best guess I have is that I've seen Bob Dylan 2 times live. Once was at the Barclays Center, and another time was at this really cool venue in Harlem, a theater. I don't recall the name of the theater. Beautiful venue, though. And before his last song, before the encore, every single performance, he would say, "Well, thank you, friends." I know my Bob Dylan impression's like not that good. It sounds kind of like Cartman or whatever. But that's where I think it comes from. I think it's a Bob Dylan thing. So that's where that comes from. Anyway, hope you're doing well. Thanks for tuning in. I'm thinking next week I might take the week off. We'll see. I also might do something special if I feel so inspired. I'm going to be on vacation, and it's rare for me, owing to what I do for a living, to truly ever go on vacation. I'm almost always ruminating on projects or communicating about projects, or it's kind of, it's an entrepreneur's life. You're kind of always on. And I guess I am an entrepreneur for better or for worse, and a creative and a lot of other things. But I really think rest is the order of the day. So I'm going to try to unplug, but you never know when inspiration might find you. And I had this idea for a podcast, which could be cool or could suck. But really, ultimately, that's for you guys to decide. So we'll see if I feel so moved to record it, if I have something in my mind. Definitely in a high state of training right now, and I can feel things in my body starting to wear down a bit. So a week at the beach of rest and relaxation would certainly be good. And it's also, tuning out like that from time to time is really important for me to kind of replenish the well, to let it fill back up on its own. But you never know. There's just something about being near the ocean that just stirs up a lot of creativity in me. So maybe that'll happen. We'll see. But yeah, I'm in a good training rhythm right now. I think I'm training 6 days a week, which is pretty high volume for me, but I've structured things in such a way where the volume is manageable and every session is constructive, including my strength and conditioning. And right now I'm just doubling down on what I do best in this run up to the New York Open. I really want to battle test some things that I've been trying to sharpen and use it to get ready for Masters Worlds. And, that's my goal, to win Masters Worlds. Might be this year. It might be 30 years from now, but that's my goal. And I'm going to do what I have to do to get there. But I always enjoy this time in comp prep. I enjoy comp prep more than I enjoy the competition itself. But I tend to think of it as comp prep is sharpening mode, and then post comp is exploratory mode. And there's beauty to each of those things. There's a real focus and refinement to my training in the run up to a competition. And then afterward, there's that deep breath, that regrouping, that studying of what happened. And for a while, I just let myself play. And Jiu Jitsu always feels brand new to me in those periods. That's when I'm picking up different things and trying them out. This most recent period of exploration was spent checking out double sleeve. Sebastian Serpa's double sleeve game is something I'm trying to work on. Who knows? Maybe I'll use some of that in New York. Maybe I won't. The other thing I found is that anytime I've gone into a competition with some sort of a strategy, things have broken in a direction away from that strategy, and I've clung to it too tightly. So I'm really going into this just having focused on what I do best and keeping my mind open and loose to the possibility that the unexpected will certainly happen. But there's real beauty and power to each of those dynamics of jiu-jitsu for me. And I would encourage you, if you're a competitor, to try oscillating between those two things every now and then. Which kind of brings me into the theme of this episode, which is a theme I believe I've talked about before, but I have some sort of new insights that I want to share with you. And I mentioned this oscillation between sharpening and exploration. Sharpening mode and competition mode, there's a high amount of tension to that for me because there's a lot at stake. I'm preparing to lay it on the line, or I'm in the act of laying it on the line. So ultimately, my performance will be a reflection of the quality of my training and the quality of my jiu-jitsu. So there's tension inherent to that, whereas exploratory mode is play. It's pure play. It's fun for me. So I'm very present to this tension in the moment of preparation for this comp and just tension in my life writ large. There's been some real stress for me lately, and I'm feeling a lot of tension. And that tension is prompting often unpleasant thoughts and intrusive thoughts, and provoking a lot of anxiety. I think that thoughts, here we are thinking about thinking, some metacognition on BJJ Meditations this week. For me, the way I experience thoughts is they tend to occur in trains. One thought will arise, and then the train starts to pick up momentum, and additional cars representing additional thoughts just start passing through my vision, the vision of my mind. And they pass with such intensity and speed that they kind of take on a life of its own. They gather so much momentum, and the space between the thinker and the thoughts sort of disappears. It's like getting pulled into a really compelling movie, this movie in your mind, and you forget that you're watching a movie. This is an experience I have frequently when I'm in this state of like high anxiety. And I can see this pattern take root in my jiu-jitsu, specifically in my competitive performances. There have been patterns of error, which I've discussed in previous episodes of this podcast, where I've made a blunder simply because I'm so overwhelmed by the tension that I can't pull back from it and see strategically. Instead, I'm bouncing off this tension. I'm trying to push it away, to make it go away, to make it end, because it's unpleasant and intrusive, as I just mentioned. So I'm thinking about this dynamic right now and feeling it, not just thinking about it. I'm feeling it. I'm present to it. And that has prompted me to spend some additional time in Sam Harris's Waking Up app. And that led me down the Joseph Goldstein rabbit hole. I really like Joseph Goldstein, and I like how approachable he feels. He's very upfront as a teacher. He's of the Dharma. I'm not a Buddhist by any stretch, but I appreciate Buddhism. But as a teacher of the Dharma, he's very relatable. He's very real. It's almost as if I knew him. I don't know if he's from the New York area originally, but feels like he could be a New York guy. But his anxiety feels very familiar to me. And he posits that anxiety is just kind of another pattern of energy in the body. We feel it. If you pay really close attention to your anxiety, to feelings of anxiety, you'll be able to link it to different aspects of your body. For me, I tend to feel it center chest area and upper abdomen area. And that anxiety produces these thought changes, which I just described. And what I'm being present to now through Joseph Goldstein and his teaching, and through Sam Harris too, indirectly, is that just like the feelings in the body, anxiety taking on that tension in the upper abdomen or the chest, thoughts are just phenomena that are arising within the body and within consciousness. They're no different. They are like weather patterns. They're just moving through. Like we're not weather. We just kind of experience weather. These energy patterns of anxiety and these apparitions in consciousness that are thoughts, they are just experiences in consciousness like any other. And what I'm driving at here is that these things, they're a part of us. They're not us, right? They're not the self. And I find myself getting into trouble, both on the mats and in my life, when I confuse thoughts and experiences for the self, right? The thinker gets lost. The watcher of the movie gets lost. The thinker of the thoughts is still there. The watcher of the movie is still there, but they forget because what they're seeing and what they're thinking is so compelling. So how do we avoid that? What Goldstein suggests, and what I've been trying to play around with in my own way here, is that we can be mindful, which is not easy. It takes practice. That's why we have mindfulness practice. It's one of the reasons why I suggest mindfulness practice as a component of any sort of physiological training regimen. But with mindfulness, we can attune to these feelings and sensations and thoughts as useful information. We can sort of take their sting away. We can put space between the thinker and the thought, or the feeling and the person experiencing the feeling. One of the ways that I've been having some success with this is the FLAIR method, which is a method that my HRV instructor came up with. FLAIR is FLARE. FLAIR stands for feel. So I'm not intellectualizing. Like if I'm experiencing anxiety, I will feel. I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to feel where that anxiety is in my body. Usually it's tension in the areas I described. I will label it. L stands for label. In this case, labeling it anxiety. I will accept it. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this as it relates to Joseph Goldstein later in the episode. But I will accept it by just giving one deep breath of acceptance, just letting this feeling be with one deep breath of acceptance. From there, we move to R, which is respond. This is where the HRV breathing comes in. I will then go through 3 resonance breaths, which for me is 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. And then E, expand awareness. Having gone through this little exercise, I now have space between the experience and the person who is experiencing, or the thinker and the thought. And interestingly, this is what I was doing in the bullpen at the New York Open as I was getting ready to go. When I would feel things get to be a little bit too overwhelming, I would go through this FLAIR exercise, go through the resonance breathing, and then expand awareness to realize that this feeling is just a part of the experience. It's not the whole experience. It's not me. It's just something that's arising in consciousness. And I really attribute that to the fact that I was able, in part, to the fact that I was able to win a match because I still felt just as anxious and nervous as I normally did, but I performed much better, and despite being physically ill too. So there was some utility to it. But there's another layer here that we can add on that specifically comes from Joseph Goldstein that I'm kind of welding to Dr. Ina's FLAIR method here. And that's then intellectually engaging, right? Because these energy patterns in the body, these thoughts, they're really signals that something is going on here. What is at the root of what is happening? And what I've discovered through this process over the past week or so here is that often at the root of this anxiety, this feeling, is that I'm not listening to some deep intuition or some need. It's almost like I'm telling myself that I'm crazy. You're crazy. It's an intellectual override, right? Like, that's not true. Ignore your experiences, ignore your feelings. Be logical here, be concrete. Certainly there's a time and a place for being logical and concrete, but I have this tendency to sort of short shrift myself in situations where this dynamic arises. So as I said to my dear friend Pat, like, I'm done doing that. I'm not doing that anymore. I've seen through this careful study and this careful thought, welding Dr. Ina's FLAIR method to Joseph Goldstein's teaching, I've seen how I sort of put myself in a corner there. So what I'm doing instead is really like sitting with this tension, feeling it, giving some space between me and it, and then allowing it to pass. You know, all these things change if you don't try and bottle them up. They go on their way. But if you try to push it away because it's unpleasant, then it sticks around. At least that's my experience. And at the heart of letting it pass versus bottling up is this notion from Goldstein that I found very resonant. There's a big difference between acknowledging a feeling and kind of tacitly sitting with its unpleasantness, and you're still holding on to the hope that it might end, right? But it might not. It might not. Something Goldstein said, this is a profound insight he had while he was dealing with some similar feelings of anxiety. He felt it in his body, and he went through this experience of expanding awareness. And then he took that extra intellectual step of asking, okay, what is really going on here? And he came to the conclusion that what was really going on was the dynamic I just described, where there was this tacit, low-level hope that the thing would end. And what he did was he said to himself, it's okay. It's okay. If this continued for the rest of my life, it's okay. And I really take that to heart. Tension is going to find me for the rest of my life. It's going to be with me for the rest of my life. It's going to be in competition. Anxiety is going to be there for the rest of my life. These things don't end. And once you can accept that and just accept it, and I'm talking to myself now, accept it as a part of normal human consciousness, you can expand awareness. You can see that there's much more going on. You can see that you're not your thoughts. You can see that you're not your feelings. And hopefully you can suffer a little bit less, but maybe not. We'll see. That's all I've got for you folks this week. We'll see if I do another episode next week. If not, I'll be back when I'm back from the beach. As always, if you are enjoying the podcast, I encourage you to just reach out to me. Send me a note. Email me at bjjmeditations@gmail.com. Let's have a conversation. It's a very one-sided, lonely conversation here, and I enjoy hearing from you. Thanks for listening, and maybe we'll talk next week. If not, we'll talk the week after.